Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Yeah, where's the beef? Remember those commercials, Rich Scheben? Wendy's used to have those commercials. Where's the beef? Well, that's a problem now because there are meat shortages in the United States. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to a USA Prepares. We broadcast 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933. Please keep your calls germane to the subject matter of today's class. And if you'd like to listen on your telephone while we are live, 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time, you can listen to us on 712-770-9418, provided by Global Star. Thank you, Global Star. Rich Scheben's with us, Jason's Engineering. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Vince. You know, I hate it when you are derogatory towards meat. I mean, we're so far advanced technologically. We have red dye in meat, meat grown in laboratories. We have steroids, hormones, antibiotics in meat, GMOs in meat, pesticide-fed cattle, cloning livestock, modified proteins. And Taco Bell and Burger King was caught with horse meat. I mean, hey, we've got it going here with meat. And
yeah.
The amazing thing is that with all these FDA regulations and government regulations, the ranchers and farmers still have to go through all these middlemen in order to sell their product. And then when they can't do it, they have to destroy their product while people are starving. What a wonderful system we have, huh?
Yeah, you must be talking about us. Yep, because we had to sell, we've only gotten half of our herd sold so far. We have to get down to, we have to sell 70%, so we can still feed our cows. And what's happened is the meatpacking industry has been shutting down, and they've said they're a couple percent, and we reported that, no, it's not a couple percent, it's more like 25%. And then a few days later they said, yeah, it's really more like 25%. So what's happened is the price of cattle has fallen dramatically. So we sold some cows at market. We're really excited about getting the check. And I have a feeling that from the numbers that I've been able to research, we will net less than $1 per pound for our cows. Now, at the same time that we're netting less than, and these are nice cows. I'm talking about 300, 400, 500 pound cows, young calves really, and heifers. And when you go to the supermarket, if you can find beef today, the relatively inexpensive cuts, which would be ground chuck, for example, the price has gone way up. Price has gone up because the supply has gone down. The supply has gone down because the beef packers have closed many of their locations, the major ones across the United States, all across the United States. They've been infected by the coronavirus. Their employees are afraid to go to work because they work shoulder to shoulder to shoulder with their peers on the production line. And like 20% of them have gotten sick with the coronavirus, and they don't want to go to work because they don't want to die, because some have died. And I don't blame them. I really don't blame them. So the good news is, while the farmers are taking a beating, a pummeling, and many of us will go under as a result of this, I hope that the meat packers go under, and I hope that food becomes local once again. It used to be, before these big muscle men came into our agricultural industry and our livestock industry and pushed us all down. So, when you think about it, the first cows that I bought were, 10 30 years ago. 30 years ago. And I paid $1.06 a pound for the same size calves that we just sold. And we netted less than $1. So the bottom line is cows haven't gone anywhere in 30 years. And this is the beginning of the collapse of the cattle ranching, cattle farming business, in my opinion. I don't think it's going to come back for quite some time, and it's going to go local. And, you know, we could have solved this problem ourselves. We could have if it wasn't for the government, because they say that it's illegal for us to sell our cows and have them processed by someone who's not USDA inspected. So there's no place for us to have them processed because the backlog is so great, because even the small meat packers have gone under. There's no place for us to have them processed. It's against the law for us to sell a cow and butcher it here unless we're FDA inspected. It's awful. Absolutely awful what's happening. And it's not like there's a shortage of food. There's not a shortage of eggs. There's not a shortage of chickens. There's not a shortage of hogs. But yet, the supply chain has collapsed in the middle because of the coronavirus infecting the processing companies. And they're between the customer and the farmer. And so I have no sleepless nights in my future thinking about those poor processors like Tyson, Smithfield, JBS, none of them. I have no sleepless nights in my future thinking about them. I'm looking forward to food becoming local, and that's where it should be. We should not be shipping beef halfway across the country, lettuce halfway across the country. It's insanity. But that's what we've been doing, because the generally dumb public wants tomatoes when they're out of season. They want lettuce when it's out of season. They want radishes whenever they want radishes. They want whatever they want. And greedy marketeers have figured out how to get it to them, while the farmer takes a pummeling. And those poor farmers who bought all this equipment, you know, hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars worth of equipment so that they can farm bigger, faster, smarter, they are in really serious trouble. Really serious trouble. We are killing, not we, chicken farmers are killing chickens, perfectly good chickens, by the tens of thousands. Farmers are pouring milk by the tens of thousands of gallons on their fields because they can't get it to market. And nobody wants to buy cows. Nobody, because what are you going to do with them? What are you going to do with them? Unless you're going to raise a cow or two for yourself and then butcher it yourself, there's not much market for cows. And that's what we're finding here at the farm. Now we have sold some cows, like one at a time. We used to be able to just load up a trailer and take them to market and they'd be gone the next day. Not anymore. Now it's very difficult. Nobody wants them at market. And individual farmers want one cow or a cow-calf pair, a mama cow and a calf. So it's really labor intensive to sort out. You know, I want that one over there. You know, you look at 100 cows. No, the other one. No, the other one. And her calf, wherever her calf is. It's really difficult. It can take you a half a day to get that cow and that calf separated when the farmer says that's the one they want. Unbelievable. But that's where we are. And so food is becoming more local and very quickly, because people are going to demand to eat. And I like that. Wendy's is in trouble because they are now rationing their meat to the restaurants. Why? Because they can't get it. Can you imagine that? Where's the beef? Where is the beef? Well, we don't have any. What's going to happen when the managers of the restaurants at Wendy's and McDonald's and Burger King and all the rest of them, Taco Bell, and they start getting assaulted and battered because customers want to know where the beef is? You know, hey, how come? Well, blame it on your government. Rich Scheben, any comments?
Oh, yeah, we can talk about this all day, but I have about 1,500 pieces of news here. But, I think we have a lot of things to worry about. And I'm going to repeat what I've repeated the last few weeks regarding smart meters and the totalitarian, tyrannical state tool, where the mayor of Los Angeles says, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to shut down your power and water. So it's not just getting the meat, it's how are you going to preserve it if the powers that be not only want depopulation, but are threatening to shut off your power. I think we have a lot of problems, and what President Trump should do is eliminate these FDA inspection exemptions, and this way farmers can literally hire a liaison between the public, have the cows shipped to the public, and let's say a person who has 10 acres wants a cow and a calf and a pregnant cow. So what you do is you have this guy, this liaison, come over and show the person, the lay person, how to butcher an animal, which anybody who's a hunter already has those skills. And then they take care of the baby, and then the next baby shows up the next year, and then they take care of that, and then they take care of the heifer. And I think if people started being self-sufficient again, I know people who here in Montana who came from California who say, I got deer in my yard, sometimes elk, turkeys all the time. I can't shoot them because they don't know how to take care of them. I've had people come to me and have me explain to them how to butcher a chicken. It's unacceptable. We have been technologically, biologically, and chemically changed. We're killing ourselves because we've lost skill sets.
Let me see if I've got this right. So, Rich, what you're talking about is the federal government just is giving away $2.1 trillion frivolously, and all we wanted to do, all you and I and USAPrepares wanted to do, was have a very small school to teach people how to be self-sufficient. They wouldn't do that. They wouldn't do that. Not Bill Gates and his cronies, not Jeff Bezos and his cronies, not George Schwartz, also known as George Soros and his cronies, not Jumpin' Joe the plagiarist. And none of those guys have said, you know what? There's a group of people that are really kind of unusual, and they can really help us. Maybe we can get their attention, and maybe USA Prepares faculty could come help us get out of this jam. No, they're not interested in us, because we have not all the answers, but we have some of the answers. We have the local answers. Let
me tell you, you just mentioned $2 trillion plus in a stimulus bill. Now, if you divided that by every single person in America, that's over $6,000 that each person could have gotten. But no, the government's got to be a liaison to dole things out, to give monies to the wrong people. And let me tell you where some of this money was going. There's 96% of your tax dollars that have gone to very frivolous, malinvestment, corrupt, manipulative departments. And I hear the music coming, so I'm going to mention that after the break, folks. Stay on board. Your face is going to be red, and steam will be coming out of your ears when I tell you where that money went to.
Oh, you won't believe it, class. Yeah, I have the bill in front of me. I have HR 748 in front of me. 335 pages, written by lawyers, and reviewed. So, class, HR 748. Thank you, Joey, for sending me the information. HR 748 is the single biggest amount of money that the government has ever authorized. And it's between $2.2 and $6.2 trillion. So as Rich said, if you just divide that just say $2 trillion, that's a 2 with 12 zeros, by the 328 million people in the United States, you get a number that's just a little over $6,000 per head. That's every man, woman, and child in the United States. But if you really go to the real number, which is the $6.2 trillion that has been authorized, that's really over $18,000 per head. And not only that, this bill, which is 335 pages long, and it's full of legalese, and I tried to several times to read several paragraphs of it this morning and last night. It was written by lawyers for lawyers. It is very complicated, extremely complicated. And it must have taken well over a year to put this bill together. As a matter of fact, the original introduction of the bill was January 24th, 19. That was before we even heard of the coronavirus. So this has been, they've been thinking about this for quite a while. And this bill also has in it $600 a week for 4 months for unemployment insurance. $600 a week for 4 months. Now, a business week is a business month is 4.3 weeks. So if you literally, because some months have, more days, some months have less days. So if you if you multiply that $600 times 4.3 weeks per month times 4 months, that's another $10,000 per employee. So you get the $18,000 at the $600. You have the $18,000 that will probably be authorized in payments of somewhere around $1,200. Then you're going to have the $600 a week for 4 months, which is another $10,000. We're talking about roughly $30,000 for employees. Benefits. Where does this money come from? It comes from inflation. There's no other place. Or taxes, or both. Rich?
Yeah, absolutely. Taxes and inflation is what the bottom 93. That's why we're losing purchasing power. That's why we're losing opportunities. That's why I talk about how we're being divided, how we're being distracted, how we're being dumbed down, because all the monies there's a huge wealth transfer going from the bottom 93%. I probably should say now the bottom 90, because that back end 3% of the wealthiest 10% has lost a lot of ground. So basically the bottom 90% of people are paying for everything through taxes and inflation. Now here's where 96% of the missing dollars went to, okay? I'm not going to mention the amounts because there's a lot of commas and lots of zeros, but I want to show you how this has been allocated. Instead of giving thousands of dollars to each person, this is where it went. Migrant and refugee assistance, student loan bailouts, NASA, the U.S. Postal Service, and the Endowment of the Arts, Endowment of Humanities. Didn't even know that was the thing. Veterans Employment Training, not to give it to veterans, but to the employment training. Mental health support, Department of Education Stabilization Fund, so they can keep more people in education employed, even though they might not be doing anything. Safe School Emergency Response to Violent Programs, public broadcasting like NPR, National Public Radio, museums and libraries, Social Security Administration for administration costs, not for the Social Security recipients, but for administration costs, cleaning supplies for the Capitol building, the Smithsonian, the JFK Center for Performing Arts, additional salary for the House of Representatives. Congress gets after basically one term, okay, maybe a little more for the House. They get a full pension, full salary that you're paying for. Upgrade to the IT department in Virginia, the State Department diplomatic programs, Agency of International Development, International Disaster Assistance, Peace Corps, Howard University, Senate expenses.
Wait. Howard University?
That's correct.
Huh. When we come back, let's talk about.
Tons of grants.
Let's mention who they are.
Of, labels. It just goes on and on and on. So congratulations, America. That's where your money's going.
Rich Scheben's with us, and class, you just heard at the top of the bottom of the hour news that Wendy's is closing some of its stores because they don't have meat to sell. This is going to get worse. It is not going to get better. As a farmer, I know it's going to get worse. And it's not just Wendy's. It's going. McDonald's is rationing beef to their stores based on what? Based on sales. So the more they sold before, in the good old days, a couple months ago, based on the more they sold, the more they will get to sell now, because there is a shortage. And it will continue throughout the restaurant industry. Now, if you think about this, how's that possible? People aren't even going to restaurants, and yet they have a shortage. And you mentioned Howard University, Rich Scheben. Howard University is a federally chartered, historically black university. Let me say that a different way. Howard University is in Washington, D.C., and it's a federally chartered, historically black university. They have an endowment right now of $693 million. And they need money for what was that? What were you saying? They need to be...
Well, that was part of the stimulus package.
Yeah, stimulus, stimulus, bailout. Really, so the universities are getting money. The airlines have been ripping us off and overcharging us every way they can. They're getting, $25 billion, I think it is. I think I read that in the bill. This bill is 335 pages long. Let me just tell you how complicated this is. I was going to read just a little bit, just like part of one paragraph. Section 11004. For an additional amount for grants under the pilot program established under Section 779 of Public Law 115-141 to prevent, prepare, and respond to coronavirus, $100 million to remain available until September 30, 2021, provided that at least 90% of the households to be served by a project receiving a grant shall be in a rural area without sufficient access to broadband. Provided further that for purposes of such pilot program, a rural area without sufficient access to broadband shall be defined as 10 megabits per second downstream and 1 megabit per second upstream, and such definition shall be reevaluated and redefined as necessary on an annual basis by the Secretary of Agriculture, provided further that an entity to which a grant made under the pilot program shall not use the grant to overbuild or duplicate broadband expansion efforts made by any entity that has received a broadband loan from the Rural Utility Service, provided further that the priority consideration for grants shall be given to previous applicants now eligible as a result of adjusted eligibility requirements, provided further that such amount is designated by Congress as being emergency requirement pursuant to Section 251B2AI of the Balanced Budget and Emergency Deficit Control Act of 1985. Is that clear? I hope you all understood that. It is 335 pages of that. Now, the president, I saw the video of him signing this, President Donald Trump. He was really proud of it. Really proud of it. This thing stood 6 inches tall. He signed it, passed out the pens, all the people in attendance got a pen. It was really, I guess that's a prized item. Now, do you think for 1 minute that the President of the United States who signed this, over $2 trillion, actually it's over $6 trillion, do you think he read and understood every single word? Do you think that? Do you think he looked at every single word? I wrote a one-sentence bill many years ago, and I read it on the air, and I don't have it in front of me, but it said something like this. It's just one sentence. That any representative who signs into law any bill without reading and understanding every single word shall be guilty of a crime punishable by not less than 10 years in prison. What I'm saying is if people sign bills into law without reading them and without understanding them, they have committed a crime. Do you think that anyone who is part of this, whether they were on the committee, whether they voted for it in Congress, do you think anyone has read the entire bill? Anyone on the planet, except for maybe the proofreader, except for maybe the team of lawyers? I'll bet you this thing cost $10 million to put this package together. Just the words. Do you think that's possible, Rich Scheben? that this House Resolution 748 cost more than, around $10 million just to put it together? You know, all these typists and reviewers and lawyers and lawyers and lawyers and lawyers and assistants to the assistants, etc. Add all that up. It's got to be over $10 million. Has to be. And that's probably a drop in the bucket.
Well, we've probably spent hundreds of $millions on the fraud and the coup, the fake coup, or the real coup, I should say, on the Russia, impeach, Mueller trial, Ukraine. Basically, they do these fancy words, these Hegelian dialectic terms, these imperial con artist methodology and strategies. So we should literally change our America's motto, because the powers that be at the very top, they're not adhering to the home of the brave and the land of the free, and or vice versa. Basically, it should be the land of the double standards and the home of the hypocrites and snitches. This is what we're taught, what's happening here. And when Vince talked about what happened about Howard University, it has nothing to do with a black-white issue, folks. It's basically an issue of freedom and liberty and information. Because right now, the powers that be are doing everything to take over all information, whether it be medical science, nutritional, jobs, economy. And, Fox News, and I've mentioned this, they fire Diamond and Silk, but they hire and keep Donna Brazile, who literally not only was caught, but admitted and rigged a presidential debate for Hillary Clinton, who gave her the questions in secret. It's all about hiding information. I'm even reading now that Obama knew that terrorists planned the Benghazi attacks 10 days in advance. It has nothing to do with this racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent hater, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, it's divide and conquer strategies that they use to feather the nest of the elite and keep everybody else in control. And the facts no longer trump propaganda, hoaxes, false flags. So before you ask a question, you got to ask, what group are you in? Is it the aristocracy, or are you the serf? Do you have nepotism connections in the aristocracy? Is it a government or private sector job? Is it big corporation or small business? What gender are you, or what gender do you identify as? Skin pigmentation, shade, sexual orientation, religion. They are dividing us for the vote. I mean, government pensions alone could start a civil war, because government pensions are getting, $3, $5, $10, $15, $20,000 a month, while everybody else is barely surviving. So the bailouts are being paid for by the little people in the form of taxes and inflation, and they think that we're stupid. And this is why, and if I may, Vince, I'm going to just jump into some articles that prove how the aristocracy thinks that we're dumb. Okay, here's an article right here. A court document names 70 people who knew sex trafficking and underage victims by Jeffrey Epstein. You see how they're wording this? People who knew. There were probably thousands of lawyers and judges and politicians and bankers and CEOs and who went to these Jeffrey Epstein Islands. But now they're wording it as people who knew. There's no rule of law in this country, folks. Alaska Air swings to loss but beats expectations. That's code for we lowered expectations dramatically. YouTube's chief product officer insults his own users, which are you, as basement-dwelling idiots. And cheat by mail, 11.6 thousand dead people on Virginia's voter rolls. Stacey Abrams says more likely to be struck by lightning than find voter fraud. And Susan Rice says this pandemic is an opportunity to make sure every American has access to the ballot by mail. Okay, I'm going to read one quote, okay, because all the Democrats are pushing vote by mail, and there's a reason for it. And the quote is as follows. It's very short. Those who vote decide nothing. Those who count the votes decide everything. And that is a quote from Joseph Stalin. So, when they talk about all this humanity and diplomacy and equality and fairness and tolerance these days, where 80% of people are living paycheck to paycheck, where central bank interventions are going to be over 25% of GDP, phony economic benefits going to the elite for the too big to fails, too big to jails, in the form of bailouts and stock buybacks. And Vince, you wanted me to talk about stock buybacks sometime today also, again. And so while debt is growing faster for the bottom 90%, we live in an emperor has no clothes to society, where all these so-called awards and all these accolades, the Nobel Peace Prize, the Pulitzers, it's all done to fake out humanity, to control the narrative. So a lot of the powers that be, the manufacturing of the perception of hate towards certain groups to create enemies by using these hoaxes and propagandas and lies and gaslighting and false flags. These are tools. These are weapons. Just like what happened in the last couple of days in Portland, Multnomah County in Oregon. Now there's no whites allowed, safe spaces for employees. And they say it's based on shared lived experience and not identity politics. That's exactly what it's not. What it is, it's group identity politics. It's victim group status. It's protectionist group status. So we're artificially propping up the top 10% through stock buybacks and stock market and bailing out banks and Wall Street and welfare for the rich and big corporations and government and asset purchases for all the big guys. While they're allowing prisoners to be released, but it's illegal to go out and work for yourself. So, folks, we're literally beyond a Twilight Zone episode here. Nothing is legitimate. We are not, when we shoot pool and play chess, they're thinking 3, 4, 5 moves ahead, and we're learning how to play checkers. And that's what's going on. We're being insulted, we're being used, and we're being broken down and making work illegitimate. We'll be right back, folks.
Rich Scheben's with us. Rich, I just want to play something. I was in the truck yesterday with our son, and we were on a farm mission, and right here in rural Missouri. And the sky turned black very, very quickly. This was 61 degrees outside, 61. It was nice and warm. Sun was shining, and it went black. And then all of a sudden, we were in a hailstorm. And I literally thought that the windshield would get taken out. I'm just going to play the audio of this. You won't believe this. It sounds like machine gun fire. Now, we turned off the road. I was driving. I turned off the road, and I got under a whole bunch of trees. And, trees protect the vehicle. But just listen to this. That was hail, and it continued for quite a while. There was so much hail that the road was like ball bearings. Now, these hail pellets were the size of quarters. They weren't ping pong ball size yet, but the whole road was covered, and it was like you couldn't drive on it because it was like driving on ball bearings, literally. I've never seen anything like that in my life come out of, almost nowhere. Boom. There it was. And if you didn't have a helmet on, I'm sure you would be really injured, seriously injured. And we were worried about our cows losing their eyes because they were out, in the field, and this thing just came very, very quickly. So not only are we experiencing the coronavirus, the economic disaster, the shortages, the supply chain breaking, but the weather's nuts. We've had 4 days of 2 inches of rain per day within 2 weeks. Everything is saturated around here. So there's so many problems. And if farmers are trying to plow their fields, I don't think that's going to work. Now, I don't know how far this rain has extended, but we've had it here in Missouri. And it is so bad that if it's a widespread area, crops cannot be planted in this. It'll take months for the fields to dry out. We've got equipment that we can't move because of all this mud. Have you heard of this as well, Rich Scheben?
Well, keep in mind, there's hundreds of weather modification tools / weapons that are patented, just like the coronavirus. So nothing surprises me anymore. Now, keep in mind, you are going to get, as population grows, we have the highest amount of people we've ever had in the history of America. So as natural disasters occur, there's obviously going to be more people being affected just because of math. But with these patents on weather modification tools by the Monsantos and the Rothschilds and all these big people, I mean, apparently Bill Gates has a patent on the coronavirus. I mean, we're getting to the point where I think I could expect anything and not be surprised. I think nothing would shock me at this point in time. Let me mention, since you talked about the coronavirus and I just mentioned it, I just want the audience to connect some very scary dots, okay? This article is titled, "This Woman is Pure Evil," talking about Nancy Pelosi blocking the investigation into Chinese coronavirus origins. And Fauci basically just coming out and saying, oh, it's not China, it's nature. Okay, it's pretty obvious where the line is between so-called Americans who have already been bought and paid for. Next article, Pelosi wants guaranteed monthly income for illegal aliens. Okay, for those of you who are living paycheck to paycheck, which is 80% of you, who have 70% who has less than $1,000 in the bank, that one was for you. Next article, coronavirus is making us all socialists. Well, yeah, when you devalue work, disincentivize work, make it illegitimate, that's what happens. Next article, Tanzania, faulty imported test kits claimed a goat had coronavirus. So a lot of these test kits, even India is saying they're not accepting any more test kits from China. Can you see how these dots are being connected, folks? And when I looked at a death chart, and this article is titled "How Convenient," look at this death chart. And basically it shows that all other morbidities and mortalities have gone down, and everybody who has, and even our government is now admitting that they are, if somebody has coronavirus or COVID-19, whatever they decide to use it, or label it as, they are throwing them into mortality if they die of something else and labeling it as coronavirus. And even the Canada's chief public office official advocates 10 years ago in a documentary that if you don't take the vaccines to come, you're going to get tracking bracelets. Welcome to totalitarian, tyrannical dictatorship control, folks. We're here.
But Scheben, when we come back, I'd like to talk for a minute about devaluing work. That's one of the reasons we're here, in this miserable place, because we've allowed the devaluation of work. We'll be right back. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Got 22s? Got shepherds? We mentioned months ago that the corona panic would be worse than the coronavirus itself. And the virus is plenty bad enough. There are people dying, there's no question about it. Our government has sent mixed messages at all levels, top to bottom, left to right. We are being led by buffoons, profiteers, and parasites. And, class, you really need to do your own research and think for yourself. There are people who are saying, wear masks, don't wear masks. Go out in public, don't go out in public. It's clear. It's absolutely clear that the only way to contain this is by isolation. That's the only way. And when Rich mentioned devaluing work, as a teenager, I was extremely fortunate. I was offered a position at Sears Roebuck and Company as an automotive mechanic. I was a teenager. And after school and high school and the weekends, I put on the mechanic shirt, blue jeans, turned my belt sideways so I wouldn't, if I leaned over a car, I wouldn't scratch it with my belt buckle. All those little things that we were taught. And I did not know everything about automotive mechanics as a teenager. Frankly, I didn't. I had a lot to learn. And the shop foreman welcomed me that day, day number 1, brought me over from the automotive shop, which was across the parking lot from the main store, brought me into the men's department, and held up a shirt. It was a gray polyester shirt, and it had gray buttons. And he said, I think this will fit fine. And he said to the cashier, charge this to my account, meaning to the automotive shop, and he bought me a shirt. Sears paid for the shirt. I still have the shirt. It still fits fine. Top quality. And that's when I learned more about automotive mechanics. Now, I was racing cars on spare time, building race engines and things like that. But I learned more about automotive mechanics at Sears. And if I didn't know something, I could ask the shop foreman. And I thought, boy, I'd like to be just like him. He knows a lot more than I do. And if I get in a jam, I can ask him, and he knows the answers. Wouldn't it be great to know everything that he knew? And he was older because he'd been there for years solving problems. There were 20 bays, 20 automotive bays, 20 cars being worked on at a time. That'd be the maximum capacity when it was full. And he was the boss. And he kept all that running smoothly. And I was impressed. And that's when I learned about the value of doing a better job. Now, did I want to do better than I was already doing? Of course I did. I wanted to be the best. I wanted to be the best mechanic they had there. But it was going to be tough for me to be the best mechanic they had there because a lot of guys have been there 20 years. But I learned from them. They took me under their wing. They showed me things. And they helped me become better and better and better. And that's when, I learned about the value of work. And I wanted to be better than I was when I started. But is that really the case today? I don't think so. Because we're paying people more to stay home than we were paying them to show up at work. And they didn't want to go to work in the first place. And we're paying government employees to do nothing and act like they're working, even when they're at the workplace. But they're not there now. They're at home acting like they're doing something, but they're doing nothing. We are overpaying people to do nothing. Now, how is it that we are going to be competitive and innovative, create great products, long-lasting products, when we have this attitude that has devalued work? It used to be, a saying in banking, hey, knock it off. You're going to make the rest of us look bad. What that means is, don't do such a good job. Slow down. Make mistakes. Because if you do a good job, you're going to make everyone else look bad. I had to learn that. I had to learn that was a phrase that was used. That was foreign to me. I thought we were all in it together. I thought everybody that worked for the bank was on the same team. We weren't on the same team. I'm trying to climb the ladder and people are shaking the ladder. There are people pulling me off the ladder. That's what it's really like. It's terrible. Now, that's what happens in industry. That's what happens in unions. That's why it costs so much to have union labor. Because they say, well, yeah, no, you can't put that many lug nuts on. That's too many. You got to slow down. Garbage people in New York City make over $100,000 a year. Is it because they have a PhD in recycling? I don't think so. Class, we're falling down. We've lost our competitive way. And around here, and this is no slight to the ladies, but there's a saying in Missouri. I never heard it before. I came to Missouri. And when someone was working on something, let's say they were framing a house, for example, and they'd look at it, and they put a level up to it, and it'd be off. It wasn't plumb. And the saying that they used in Missouri, well, that's good enough for the girls we run with. That's good enough for the girls we run with. Another way of saying that, well, that's good enough for the government. That means way off. Rich, have you heard those expressions?
Well, I have. And can I grab the microphone and talk about the delegitimization of work for a little bit and comment on what you just said? Thank you. Basically what you've mentioned is that hard work, proven results, qualifications no longer matter. And I want to talk about what has happened where people have been literally demanding to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job because of what group you come from. And I've talked about this till I'm blue in the face with many, many specific examples. At the same time, the same people who are demanding no protection, rights, or restitution under the rule of law for people who are negatively affected. So basically, demanding to lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job, demanding no more rule of law, and what they're doing is enabling and protecting the most corrupt companies in the country and the world with liability, protection, and immunity. So when you think you're protecting your group, your hyphen, your pronoun, you're really insulting it because you're not only not being American, but you're giving free lunch to the elite. And I have given thousands and thousands of examples over many radio shows, especially this one, over 9 years, that shows that the wealth redistribution is going from the bottom 93%, now the bottom 90%, to the big boys. And they're using mostly divide and conquer strategies. They're also distracting us and dumbing us down. And I've given thousands of examples under that category as well. Now think about some of the consequences that have happened. Think about the credit and debt distress that we have in a debt-backed currency system. So when you eliminate hard work, proven results, and qualifications, it gets jobs and promotions and accolades or whatever kind of rewards based on what your gender is, what your gender you identify as, what skin pigmentation shade you have, what sexual orientation you are, what religion you are. When that happens, you are literally insulting your group's work ethic, ability, and intelligence by saying, I can't compete. Remember when Ilhan Omar said a few months ago, oh, well, Latinos can't compete in a merit-based system. Well, there's a poll, and that's one of my articles that I was going to mention today, and I probably won't get to have time. Basically, Hispanics are the strongest opponents of immigration. So Hispanics are showing to be more American than other Americans. And yet, the Democrat Party is saying that they can't compete in a merit-based system. So we degrade people based on all these groups. We disrespect them. And you never empower a group or a hyphen or a nation by lowering the bars of standards and expectations for a job. This is all meant to make us submissive, to break our will, to reward America through mediocrity. And that destroys us. So opportunity for the bottom 90% only comes if you have certain maybe nepotism or big head start, like you're placed on third base and you're bragging to everybody you hit a home run. So as the elite get more protection, more free lunch, and we lose our wealth, I want you to think about the credit and debt distress that's been happening. I want you to think about all the defaults, delinquencies, and bankruptcies, where the little guy loses his home and loses his job and loses his livelihood and loses his everything, but the big guy gets bailed out. because they're too big to fail or too big to jail, or they have certain connections. And what happens to consumer confidence? It drops like gravity through the basement. So when you look at commodities, federal debt, emerging markets, consumer debt, municipal markets, mortgage debt, corporate debt, and the big guys who can afford the lobbyists, the PACs, who are labeled under special interest, who own Congress, they get all the bailouts. And the little guy gets screwed. And that is a very quick breakdown. One of these days when I get to monologue by myself, I'll go into more specificity and detail on how this should be. And Vince, I've talked about this for years. I've talked about how we're heading towards a deflationary, stagflationary environment. And one day, when consumer confidence breaks, all this money printing is could possibly send us into a major inflationary, hyperinflationary period. Now, we do have inflation, but we have inflation of necessities for the little people, mostly in the form of food. And as the technocracy and the technology increases, we're going to have more robotics, automation, artificial intelligence taking the little people's jobs, and we're going to have unsustainable headwinds for future rate of growth for the little people. That's why you've heard me say over the years, let's stop talking about these phony measurements like GDP, like CPI and inflation, like unemployment. Everything's doctored. Every book is cooked, and that's especially with the coronavirus. Even though it's a real virus, even though it is very much an issue, even public health officials in the USA are now admitting that COVID death numbers are inflated. Everything's got an agenda behind it.
Scheben, you mentioned Howard University. Howard University, as I mentioned, and the reason I'm mentioning this is, class, because not everyone has heard of Howard University. It's in Washington, D.C. They have a $693 million endowment. They have about 9,100 students. Of those 9,100 students, 133 of them are Hispanic. 306 are white. There are a few American Indians there, a couple hundred, and the rest are black. It's predominantly black university. 96% of the freshmen have received financial aid. The average amount of financial aid is $24,000. The tuition for Howard University is about $27,000. Room, board, and tuition is about $27,000 a year. And Howard University, has received a benefit from the CARES Act. Why? They've got a $693 million endowment. Why not use that? What's the problem? I think, Rich Scheben, that's an example of these special groups that you're talking about.
Well, absolutely. I mean, everything, when they talk about college being this benevolence and information, here's an article right here that says shady ties exposed between Jeffrey Epstein and Harvard University. And we know Harvard had a Chinese spy working in their science department getting Chinese money. And here we have angry undergrads suing 50 colleges for billions in refunds. Every young adult that has graduated from college over the last 20 years should sue every frickin' college in this country because it's a scam. 90% of the degrees are worthless. When I had a degree in forestry and I went to the National Forest Service for a job interview, this is in the early 80s, they told me that I could not get hired as a white male. They hired two girls sitting in the waiting room, no experience, no education. Education means jack crap, okay? And here's another article. 10 women's groups goes dead silent on the Biden assault accusation. It doesn't matter what you do. It matters what group you come from. And the Democrats trump women. That's just the way it is, and no pun intended here. And that's why there's another article. The way liberals smear Tara Reade is everything rape survivors fear. It doesn't matter who you are or what group you're from. They're going to make everybody create chaos and infighting, and it's all divide and conquer strategies. That's why I talk about practice what you preach laws. That's why I talk about the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. Here's an article, Juanita Broderick. You remember her? She was one of the rape victims from Bill Clinton. Well, apparently she blasts the endorsement from Hillary to Biden. Well, you remember her. Joy Behar basically said that she was a tramp. See, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what gender you are. You think that they care about you. Do you think they care about your skin pigmentation, your sexual orientation, if you're transgender? They don't give a damn. All they care about is divide and conquer and lowering the bars of standards and expectations. They care about eliminating the rule of law. They care about enabling and protecting the biggest corrupt corporations and big government and giving them liability immunity. There's an article here when they were talking about Joe Biden's accuser, Tara Reade. Some of these things I can't mention over the air that the Democrats were calling her. And at the same time, the World Health Organization is encouraging children younger than 4 years old to be taught masturbation and gender identity. But we're not putting these people we're not pointing the finger at them because the emperor has no clothes. And you're afraid to be called a racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, conspiracy theorist, with an anti in front of every word, ism, ist, and phobia on the back of every word, because that's not part of the narrative. And this is why we have a historic drop in math and reading scores since the adoption of Common Core, because they have to dumb us down to pull this stuff off. We'll be right back, folks.
Years ago, I was asked to write specifications for some school systems that wanted to buy some computers. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is so that you understand why some companies have made a fortune at the expense of other companies. Why is it that some companies are so wealthy, make so much money, and you wonder why? I'm going to tell you right now. So, I was asked to write specifications for computers, like what kind of computers should we buy for the children to be used in the school system? Well, what I wrote was that all the computers must have individually replaceable motherboards, power supplies, keyboards, mice, video cards, network cards, hard drives, etc., sound cards. And they must be they must meet industry standards. They must be individually replaceable, and they must be available on the open market. Nothing proprietary can be used in any of the computers that would be purchased by these school systems that I wrote the specifications for. So let's say a computer was dropped and the hard drive was broken. You could buy a hard drive made by Western Digital, Seagate, other companies. You didn't have to buy a proprietary hard drive. If the power supply broke or blew or wore out, it was damaged somehow, you could buy one on the open market. The price of a Dell power supply was about $230 at that time. The price on the open market was about $53 for a generic power supply. So I said that these computers had to have generic replaceable parts. Nothing in them could be proprietary, not even the case. So if the case got damaged, broken, banged up, you could take out the motherboard, the power supply, the hard drive, whatever wasn't broken, and buy a different case that looked completely different. But it had to be a generic case that met standards with spacing for standard motherboards. Now, when I wrote those specifications, Dell could not compete because Dell did not have individually replaceable video cards. They didn't have individually replaceable power supplies that were, and when I talk about replaceable, I'm talking about standard sizes, industry standards that were available on the open market. If you had a Dell computer, you needed a Dell power supply, which was 6 times the cost of anybody else's, in the generic world. So what happened was school systems who weren't very smart, who had people who were willing to accept, I don't know, maybe gifts from big companies like Dell, maybe. They bought into, boy, these Dells are really something. And they didn't look into what would it cost to replace the power supply later. What would it cost to, you can't replace the video card? No, there is no, you have to replace the entire motherboard, which has the video controller, which has the hard drive controller, which has the network controller, which has the sound controller. You got to replace the whole motherboard. How much is that? $800? Wow. That replacement was more than an entire computer that was a generic computer, by far. So what happened was these generally dumb school systems bought into buying computers from companies such as Dell, and they were locked in. And then when a computer failed, they said, it costs so much to fix them, maybe we should get some new computers. So what did they buy for the second round? The same as what they bought from the first round, except the new and improved model, which didn't have individually replaceable parts. So we're locked in. Now, who did this? Well, that'd be government organizations, schools, hospitals, government agencies. So if you look around and you look at their computers, how come they all say Dell? Why is that? Because they were the lowest price? Absolutely not. They were not the lowest price. By far, they were not the lowest price. So what I'm giving you is just one example of why certain companies succeed and other companies don't succeed. Because those who are willing to encourage their big customers to buy their products through, maybe lunches, maybe travel, maybe junkets, maybe cash bribes. I don't know. I don't know exactly how it's all done. But when it is done, there's a lot of money to be made. And you've heard of those $700 hammers and those $700 toilet seats, because the hammer has to meet certain specifications. For the government to buy a hammer, it's got to be, it's got to have length, width, girth, shaft size, weight. And isn't it interesting that that hammer is already being made by somebody else? That's how it works. And when you look at this stimulus package, it should make your blood boil. Absolutely make your blood boil. And Howard University is just one tiny example of a special interest group. Why? Why have they been singled out to get money? Why? When they have $693 million in endowments. Why? Why are you paying for that? Why am I paying for that? So what happens in the long run? Well, people are hungry. Food is not available in the stores. Meat is in short supply. Meat is being rationed. At some point, it's been widely reported that at some point, people are going to lose it. And what are they going to do? They start breaking things. That's what they've done in the past. We had the civil riots in the 1960s in big cities, Watts, Newark, New Jersey. What happened? Bashing, slashing, crashing, burning. That's what happened. National Guard was on every corner. Snipers were on the rooftops. People burned their own cities. $1,200? What's that for? You all got yours. I didn't get mine. Mrs. Finelli didn't get hers. Our children, my boys didn't get theirs. Where is it? And when you do get it, the prices that you pay for things are going to go up. Not everything, but the things that you need, yeah, they're going to go up. It's pretty scary. So what do? I suggest you buy food that'll last a while. Get some plants. Start that garden. And that's a problem, too. Because if you go to buy plants at the Chinese factory outlet, they don't look so good. And the ones that they have are pretty expensive. Now, how do I know they don't look so good? Because I got in the truck, rolled up the windows, and I went by to see what plants look like from the outside, from my truck. They don't look so good. Why? Because they don't have anybody taking care of them. Why? Because not too many people are going in stores. So I heard some reports from, the Center of Activity on the East Coast, Washington, D.C. They're saying that we're going to have this fixed by the end of the year. Right. Not a chance. In my world, not a chance. Rich Scheben, any comments on what I've said?
Well, yeah. I mean, when you really look at everything that's happening with computers, it's really an update on dumbing down the American people in a lot of ways. The change in definitions, they're using subliminal messages with these updated new computers. A lot of it is Marxist-Alinsky, Frankfurt School, Cloward and Piven Communist Manifesto based. Just look at the agenda that's been forced on us with this economic shutdown and AKA coronavirus. I mean, forced austerity, crashing economy. Think about the chain reaction this occurs when you delegitimize work. When you make us vulnerable to one little pin that pops the bubbles. Okay, free market supply and demand is almost irrelevant. Let's get rid of cash because it might carry the virus. Let's create a centralized government crypto, which will enslave everybody except for the elite. Let's bow down to technological control by China, along with the UN, the World Health Organization, Hollywood, Soros, Gates, and all the other players. Let's make us submissive and break our will with social distancing so we can't have peaceful assembly anymore. Let's eliminate voting. It's not legitimate. It's got to be by mail, so it could be rigged. Let's get rid of the Constitution, freedom, liberty, and the rule of law. Let's have starvation and have food shortages. Let's continue with more fake information for the mainstream media. Let's have depopulation. Let's get rid of free speech. Let's force vaccines on people to reduce their immune system and give them immunity passports so that you have to show them your papers no matter where you go, or you can't do commerce or even live. Let's have forced lockdowns. Let's have house arrests. Let's
we have all this. We're there. We are there. We have forced lockdowns.
Well,
and
this
we are
is
getting,
why.
and we are
exactly
getting
what I'm saying. This is exactly what these divide and conquer strategies is doing. This is exactly when you delegitimize work and nobody cares anymore because nothing matters. This is what's happening. And it's up to the people.
Cash. I like cash. And I'll tell you why I like cash. That's just one of the things you talked about. I like cash because it settles the debt right then and there, immediately. So if I buy something, let's say I bought a truck years ago for $3,000 cash, 3,000.00. I still drive it today, 2004 Rust Bucket, Chevy Rust Bucket. And it's rusty. It really is. It's getting lighter every day. Parts are falling off, the sides of it.
Hey, that's why they invented baling wire and duct tape.
Yeah. And Bondo. Well, cash is great for a lot of reasons. Number one, when I paid the seller for it, I handed him the cash. He handed me the title and the keys, and I drove the truck away. It was mine right then and there. Subject to rent from the state, meaning I had to, if I wanted to drive it on the roads, I had to, legally, I had to pay them tribute. License plates, registration, title, things like that. Change of title. But the debt was settled right then and there, instantaneously. Now, it wasn't like I gave him a check and the check had to clear, a couple days later. It wasn't like I gave him a credit card and, I'd pay that off in 30 days when the statement came due. It was settled right then and there. And another thing that's nice about cash is it's mostly anonymous. So I can buy something and I don't have to say, hey, I'm Vincent Finelli. Here's where I live. And here is the electronic substitute for money. It can be anonymous in many ways. And I like that. And the government says, well, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. That's not the point. The point is it's none of their business. None of their business what I buy. None of their business. I can't buy dynamite. They won't sell it to me. I'd like to buy some. There's some tree stumps I'd like to blow out of the ground and get rid of. But I can't because I can't buy. Rich Scheben's with us. So, we've been talking about manipulation for years and years. About 9 years with Rich Scheben. And here's an example. So, J. Crew and Hertz, let's see, J. Crew, Hertz, and Gold's Gym filing for bankruptcy. Well, that's just 3 companies. And headline news on Drudge Report says that there'll be about 3,000 daily deaths in 3 weeks. So 3 weeks from now, they're expecting 3,000 deaths a day. That's 1 death every half a minute. And the market, the Dow, is up 400 points. If that doesn't look like manipulation to you, I don't think we're going to be able to help you.
Well, Vince, keep in mind, public health officials are admitting that the COVID death numbers have been inflated, and I've gone over that quite a bit too. But Vince, we only have a couple.
Yeah, and they've been underinflated too.
Let me ask you, since we talked about the delegitimization of work, let me ask you a question. If the government says you can't earn a living and choose your job because of what group you're in, and we're not protected under the rule of law anymore, why do we still have to pay our taxes and insurance? That's my question to you.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's the shooting, I believe, is going to start. I really believe that, and I can't tell what it is. I can't tell whether it's going to be a revolution or a civil war or both. But the municipalities are underwater, a lot of them. The pensions are not going to be paid. When that happens and these people who are used to just sitting at home and making a lot of money doing nothing because they've had these government-type jobs, when that starts to crack and they don't get paid, and at the same time, the municipalities say, you know what, we're going to have to raise the personal property tax and the real estate tax for those homeowners and landlords and so forth by 30, 40, 50, 100%. People are going to be really angry. People are going to be angry at the squandering of these $2 to $6 trillion that we've been talking about today. And they're going to lose it. They're going to be hungry. They've got arms. They've got ammunition. And they've got time.
Yeah, but Vince, keep in mind the Los Angeles Lakers, they get a bailout. So if you're part of the bread and circus that can keep people calm and give them recreation on their boob tube at home, you're going to get a bailout. And how about the New York Police Department? They're issuing summons for social distancing even when people are having barbecues, but yet they're not disclosing what was on Anthony Weiner's computer. And how about California? People are being arrested 3 times in 12 hours, but they're back on the street because of zero bail policy. Everything is about propaganda today. How come Roger Stone, the FBI, told him that he will not get any jail time if he revealed dirt on President Trump? We're not living in reality. Everything is propaganda, lies, false flags, hoaxes, gaslighting, everything. See, you and I are talking common sense and logic. It almost doesn't even apply. Vince?
Okay, so the Chicago Fed, as in Federal Reserve, just announced that they're expecting a 34% unemployment rate. 34%. Those are the ones they count. So they're not counting everybody. The Great Depression, the first one, 1929 and all the way up to 1945, that unemployment rate at the worst was about 25%. Chicago Fed is saying 34%. That's pretty bad. Really, really bad. And it looks like it's going the way we said it's going to go. It looks like the collapse is in. So according to statistics I'm reading, U.S. manufacturing orders have crashed by the most ever. By the most ever. Gasoline consumption dropped by the lowest level ever recorded. U.S. vehicles, light vehicles, that'd be small trucks like pickup trucks, fell to the lowest level they've seen since the industry has seen since the 1970s. Now, the 1970s is when we had the Arab oil embargo, when you couldn't get gasoline. It was unavailable. You could get $3 worth. And every other day. If you were willing to wait for maybe 4, 5, 6, 7 hours in line. Global smartphone shipments are down almost 12% for the first quarter compared to a year ago. Hong Kong just recorded the worst economic contraction in its entire history. Consumer spending is down 7.6% during the first quarter of 2020. American Airlines posted a loss of $2.2 billion. And Neiman Marcus, JCPenney, and J. Crew are headed for bankruptcy. J. Crew already is, and Hertz, and Gold's Gym. It's really, really bad, and it's going to get worse, and people are going to starve. Rich Scheben, you've got 10 seconds.
People, read, research, think for yourself, and speak up.